Hello, I am here to try and explain Danish numbers to you. It's often said that the Danish counting system is one of the most bizarre, baffling, nonsensical counting systems in the world.
Danish. Danish is an astonishing one. The Danish number for 58. Half thrice, 2.5, times 20, plus 8.
Like, to understand how to count in Danish, you must first learn maths. No, it's not really like that. Let me try to explain what's really going on. The first thing to realise is that the Danish counting system works in multiples of 20. It's not base 10 like most of us are used to. I think this base 20 system goes back to the old days of counting sheep. As a shepherd, when you have counted 20 sheep, you get your knife and you make a little mark on a piece of wood. And that mark is called a score. It's actually the same word as we use when we score a piece of paper with some scissors. You're making a mark on it. It's the same thing. And you might have even heard this in English, 3 score. 3 score is 3 marks on a bit of wood, each mark signifying that you have counted 20 sheep. So 3 score means 60. And the Danish word for 60 is pretty much 3 score. In Danish, the cardinal numbers start 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you've got 3 for 60. And the S there actually stands for sinds 20, which means times 20. But I find it helpful to think of it as score. So that explains tres and fies. 3 score and 4 score, 60 and 80. Now what about 50? Does anyone ever say 2.5 score? I don't think so. But the Danes do, whether they realise it or not. 50 is actually 2.5 score. Now here's the catch. You need to know how to say 2.5 in Danish. And here's the funny thing about half in Danish. It's never half past something. It's not 2.5. It's always halfway on the way to the next number. It's the same with telling the time, actually. The time 2:30 isn't said as 2:30, but 3:30. Halfway to 3. You're halfway filling up the next hour. This made a lot more sense to me when I realised that the Danish word for drunk is full, and the Danish word for tipsy is half full. You're halfway there. In the same way, 2.5 is 3:30. Almost. It's actually 1/3. So now we need to know that the ordinal numbers are første, anden, tredje, fjerde, femte. So 2.5 becomes 1/3, which is 1/3. And again we add the S for sinds 20, or score, if you like to think of it that way. And we end up with 1/3. I'm halfway through the 3rd score. And the Danish word for 50 is 50. I should say at this point that Danes don't think of it this way at all. Just like a native English speaker doesn't hear the word 50 and think, oh yeah, 50, that's 5 times 10. To us, it's just a concept of 50. We know what the number 50 means. It's kind of its name. And it's the same for Danes, except its name is 50. So they're not doing any maths in their head to get there. So this is what we got so far. 50 is 1/3 score. Tres is 3 score. 1/4, 1/4 score. Fies is 4 score. 5 is 1/5 score. And no, they don't say fems for 5 score. At this point, it's enough of the score nonsense. It just goes 100. There's one final piece to explain. Something that initially seems a little bit weird to English speakers. If I take, for example, the number 58, Danish doesn't say 58, but 8 and 50. And if you think that's weird, I just have one thing to say to you. 18. I bet it didn't trouble you at all that I said 8 first and then teen. I don't imagine your brain went, oh yeah, 18, that's 8 and 10. You are so used to hearing numbers that you hear 18 as one number. That's just the way you say that number. So that's how the Danish counting system works. But trust me, when someone who grew up speaking Danish hears, for example, 58, they're not saying in their head, oh yeah, 8 and 1/2 times 20. The 1/2 means halfway to 3, which is 2.5. So I've got 2 times 20, that's 40, plus 10, and that 8. No, they just understand the concept, 58, just as easily as you or I understand the idea of this number in our own native language. Now, if you think that the Danish counting system is hard, you should spare a little thought for the Danes learning English. My housemate sometimes writes numbers in the air, and she asks me, 50, is that 50 or 15? You know, it kind of sounds quite similar, so that can be confusing. It's ultimately a question of what you're used to, what you heard whilst you were growing up, and that is why Danish numbers aren't quite as ridiculous as you might think.